Okay, so welcome everybody to this virtual ATM session. And this morning we're going to look at catapulting resilience through technology and analytics. My name is Lee Hayhurst. I work for the Travel Weekly Group in the UK. We're also the parent of the Global Travel and Tourism Resilience Council, which has been talking about crises and resilience for a number of years now. So we feel extremely relevant to today's discussion. We've brought together an extremely international group of speakers for this session, as befits a travel conference. So we've got speakers beaming in from Toronto, from Hong Kong, from Tokyo, from London, and from Madrid for this session. So welcome to the guys. What I'll do is, by way of introduction, we'll get them all talking and introducing themselves. We've got a couple of speakers who will kick off with a bit of insight into consumer sentiment at the moment, which is obviously very important, and all companies are looking to see where consumer sentiment lies, given what we're going through. And then we've got some technology companies on the line who will talk about what they're doing, how they've changed their businesses in reaction to COVID-19, and what they see as being the key factors going forward, how technology and analytics play a part in the recovery and bringing travel back to some sort of normality. So what I'll do is I'll introduce them one by one. We'll kick off with the guys from Skyscanner. We've got Gavin Harris on the line. He's the Commercial Director and Strategic Partnerships at Skyscanner. Welcome, Gavin.
Thanks, Lee.
Well,
good to be here.
So yeah, Gavin's got a bit of insight from Skyscanner's perspective. They've been doing regular consumer sentiment pulse analyses of where consumer sentiment is. So you can go. He's got a few slides to go through to show us that, and then just give us a bit of an insight, Gavin, into how this pandemic and this crisis has affected the Skyscanner business as well. So over to you, Gavin.
Sure. Thanks, Lee. Yeah, so I imagine most people on this call would recognise Skyscanner as a sort of global search engine. But the reality is, like many travel players, the traffic and bookings and search traffic has really gone through the floor over the last sort of 3 months as well. I'm glad to say that if I was speaking here a month ago, I would have a big frown on my face, but we're just starting to see some green shoots in terms of search traffic as well. So I'm glad it's this month and not last month for sure. So the reality is at Skyscanner is normally everything's about the sort of search platform that we're operating. But there's been a real shift in focus and interest with Skyscanner around the data side of things. And that data really is, you can divide it into two, I suppose. You've got the travel insight data product that we have just now, which we share with airline partners and travel agency partners. And that's really our search traffic, traveler demand. So how people are searching in terms of when they're searching, what the booking windows are, where they're searching to, routes, etc. And airlines are finding that increasingly important because it's forward-looking data rather than booking data. So they're looking to see when there's a spike in, I don't know, France to Italy searches and things like that as well. So that's Travel Insight, the product that we've been supporting our partners with. On the other side, which has become extremely clear during this challenging time, is just the importance of how the traveller is feeling and how their behaviours are changing. Because the reality is that there is a huge blocker just now in terms of governments closing borders, blocking certain travel, etc. But even when that does or is released, then it's really travel behaviour and their confidence and the anxiety and how is that going to look when these borders are opened as well. So I'm just going to quickly go through a couple of slides just to give you an idea of what that traveller sentiment data is looking just now. Just context, it's a weekly pulse survey that we do to our global sites. And then we're just monitoring the change. And good news as well is it seems to be improving as a whole on a global level as well, week on week. So if you give me a second, I'll just quickly share my screen. Fingers crossed for no technical issues. Can I just have a thumbs up if you can see that? Yep, great stuff. So in terms of the reports that we're looking at just now, So this is one of the main questions, which is how confident does a traveller feel that they can get on a flight within sort of numerous time periods, whether it's next week, 7 days, 1 month, 1 to 3 months, 6 months, etc. So what you're looking at just now is actually a global view of our global travellers, that 70% of them feel they're safe enough to travel on an international flight within the next 6 months. And again, that's improving over time. If you look at shorter periods of 1 to 3 months, then it's 24%. It's quite stark, and you'll see in terms of when I move on to the next slide, in terms of how that changes by geography and region. So I'll quickly move over to that as well. The next one, more confident. Again, this is travellers looking at how confident is that traveller that they'll be flying domestically within 6 months, and it's up at 89%. And likewise, 1 to 3 months is 25%, pretty similar to international. But my final slide, it really just shows you how that changes across the region. And you can clearly see that sort of Middle East and Europe is up there extremely high at 80%. And then if you look into Asian markets as a whole, it's 54%, and Americas it's 64% on top of that as well. And to give you an idea, there's a real correlation between governments making announcements of reducing border controls and bans to some of the search traffic we're seeing. So like I said, Germany just now is very positive, moving in the right direction, whereas the surprising ones would be countries like Australia and Korea, where you would look on the face of it that they've handled the lockdown extremely well and they've contained the virus very well, but they're very nervous when it comes to the prospect of international travel. So thanks for bearing with me with those quick slides, and I'll pass back to Lee if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. Actually, that was quite interesting, that last slide, the lack of positivity in Asia on 54%, where actually in a lot of the countries in Asia seem to have dealt with COVID far better than many places in Europe, and Europe seems to be on 80%. So yeah, that is interesting. Is that the Australia effect that you said there, that maybe bring that down, average down?
There's the Australia effect and there's a Korea effect, and to be honest, a lot of the domestic searches that we're seeing a lot of growth, it's coming from markets like Korea, Japan, and even Australia recently. There's been a lot of interest in some of the northern cities like Cairns, and I think it's probably just countries that have got domestic markets. Korea was at one stage driving nearly like a huge percentage of all the Skyscanner traffic, because it was one of the first, the sort of Jeju Seoul route that opened up early as well. But there definitely seems to be at a country level, the data that we're seeing is that there's a nervousness or there's an anxiety around international travel. Domestic seems fine, but international travel seems a big step that side of the world.
Okay, great. I should have mentioned before we started, just to draw your attention, people on the delegates on the call, that we are running a poll during the session, and we'll give you the results at the end. But we're looking to find out from you guys what you think is the biggest barrier to rebuilding confidence among travellers that technology could potentially address. And there's a bunch of options there, so please do choose your favourite, and we'll take what the result is at the end. So let's hand over now to Carlos, who's Chief Marketing Officer at Mabrion, based in Spain. Because you're also looking at consumer sentiment and trends. That's your job, that's your role, that's what Mabrion does. So a bit about how COVID-19 has impacted your business, how it's changed the way you do things, and I think you've got some slides as well to give us a little bit more insight into consumer sentiment. Over to you, Carlos.
Thank you. Yeah, what we do is trying to understand what are the current dynamics. I mean, that's the new reality, the new era that we are facing is showing us how important it is to having up-to-date data to understand the current dynamics and the upcoming dynamics in a short term, even in a really short term nowadays, since the uncertainty is huge. So what we do is analyzing several different types of data from the tourism and travel sector to better understand that. This has a lot to do with what Gavin was mentioning right now. We share some sources in terms of studies. In terms of sentiment, we are working really hard to follow the what we call the security perception, for example, which is an indicator what we get from monitoring social media interactions. So basically, by monitoring spontaneous interactions in social media, even now when there are not tourists, we can get interactions talking touristically about a destination related to tourism, showing intent of visiting, etc., and get a lot of really good insights to know what's the security perception, what are the interest movements, since we are seeing also different patterns on how the tourist interests are moving for different destinations and from different origins, right? So let me, I'm gonna share the screen and show you real-time data from, as an example from Dubai, which is a destination we have been monitoring for a long time already. And we can take a look on some of the indicators we created specifically for this situation and how we try to help destinations and also companies and corporations to better understand what's going on and how to apply their decisions right now or in the shorter term, right? So let's take a look on, you should be seeing my screen. Okay, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the main dashboard of our, what we do is basically is transforming data into information. So we put all that information into a platform, right? And what I was thinking on showing you is this kind of indicator, for example, right? What we can do is, for example, measuring the impact of the coronavirus in terms of tourist mentions, right? So even now, when there is no tourist, sorry, there is, okay, now better. Thank you. Even now, when there is no tourist, we still keep on capturing or getting tourist mentions, and we can measure the impact of the pandemic or the outbreak into these tourist mentions and measure the impact in terms of different things. And we can see here, for example, the evolution. This is Dubai for the last 3 months, from the 1st of March to yesterday, the 1st of June, how the security perception was evolving daily for different markets, right? Right now, we are comparing UAE versus UK and US, and you can see how the same situation is impacting in a different way for the different origin markets, right? For the locals, it's obviously less impacted, but when comparing other origin markets, the difference it's really key, right? Also by comparing the spontaneous demand, this is something that Gavin was also talking about. This is how the flight searches to visit Dubai has been evolving since the 1st of March, right? We see how clearly from that point there is a switch on the tendance, and the current flight searches are much lower than it was the year before. And from here, it seems to be slightly recovering, right? So those are 2 or 3 indicators so easy to calculate for us to follow the impact that can be then disaggregated a lot in terms of analytics to know what's going on currently, right? So that was just an example I want to share with you, right? Well, it's back to you, Lee. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Carlos. Let's move over. We've moved over now from Europe to North America to Robin Ingle, CEO of Travel Navigator. So let's bring you, Robin, in here. So same question to you, really. How is this situation evolving your business, the way you operate initially? And I guess it goes back to what the guys have been talking about. It's this need for some real live data to pump into your system so you can communicate that to the travelers that you help inform and advise.
Yes, there's a few things that come into it. We have a number of technology properties So we deal in healthcare. We provide health information, health tools. We do medical second opinion within our Novus Health group. With Travel Navigator, we actually provide localized data for the traveler, and security warnings, weather, health, all of that information is provided them into one application. And we also provide through an API information to other companies who have invested in their application. We've taken that information along with our big data AI group called Near Threat, and we've moved it into one application that integrates all of the protocols that are being created to help encourage travelers and make it easy for them. So within the application, we've actually taken it so we connect to their ID, we connect to their itinerary, we connect to the protocols that the airline might have, the airport might have, the country when you enter the country, including up-to-date COVID information and disease-related information. So our big data, for example, is taking billions of bits of data regularly during the day in direct feeds that we get from groups like the World Health Organization, CDC, WHO, the NASA, other organizations. We're taking that and we're providing a mapping for individuals so they can actually see down to a neighborhood any kind of a risk or threat. And we can apply filters to make it easy for them to understand. So we've taken that and pulled that into one product and looking at integrate in other countries or other companies. So for example, if Skyscanner has information on booking, we can integrate that into the application. If Mobrian has data that they're gathering and it's relevant to the individual, or we can take that as gathering the information and providing it to Mobrian, we can do that. With Bespoke, we can use their automated chat features coming in. And with iFree, we can use it with the SIM card, for example. So there's a way to integrate services, but also provide a rich contextual information source for travelers. And that's what they need right now, is that real information, because there's a lot of false information out there. And I'll just give you a quick example. I'm not going to be as smooth as Carlos and Gavin. So we got to look at, there's 3 stages we see. So pre-vaccine, which is the stage we're in, and the vaccine is going to take a long time. We have in our medical group, we know the idea of when a actual vaccine will appear will be a long term out. So we have to get to a position where we can actually live. So post-vaccine, we've got risk awareness. We've got to make sure that people understand what the potential risks are, and then an ongoing innovation as we do it. So we've connected to destination entry, exit requirements, personal health records or health certificates. We have regular virus updates, and we're doing this on a daily basis. News feeds with updated travel, health, and security information. This is a touchless environment, so we're working with the World Travel and Tourism Council and other organizations like IATA and UNWTO are looking at how they create this cross-border access service. We're taking country-based vaccination and medical requirements and connecting to official government apps for tracking and tracing. So if you enter South Korea, for example, you have to download their app. Notification of proximity to high-risk areas. We're doing this today. In the picture you see on the right-hand side, we're actually providing this down to a very localized level with 80 different threats, including disease. But we're also overlaying that with 650 different overlays, like all the hotels in the world. And then we've got location tracking and contact tracing by providing that information within the application, and location risk and resilience indicators. So we have the ability for check-ins for individuals, and we know that business travel is going to be one of the first groups that countries are looking at bringing in. And all of this is delivered in a private and secure environment. Our healthcare, for example, is provided to insurance companies and financial institutions. where we need to have full compliance. Now I will come back and stop sharing my screen. So what we've done is taken the information that we've had and tried to aggregate it into an application that can help encourage travel. And travel is such a big area and such important to the politics and to just humanity that we've got to encourage it. And I think doing this in a cooperative way is the best way to do it. Thanks,
thanks Robin. And I can see, obviously, it's very clear from what you've just shown us, that's obviously a very powerful tool for a business traveler. If you're a corporate out there, you've got a duty of care for your travelers. So you need this information, you need to communicate it. Do you see, because of the concerns about everybody traveling now for health reasons, do you see a leisure travel or a B2C application for this, or people will want this information themselves, won't they? So
yeah, and providing information so that the people could get it in a synthesized way. So you have to provide a filter to the regular traveler just so that they can understand the data, and that's part of it. So we want to make sure that we can provide it in different formats. We've been doing this since 2011 with our Travel Navigator application with millions of users in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. In our healthcare space, we also have interest within the region. So in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Ras Al Khaimah, in Saudi, we're actually looking at providing this within the healthcare system. So when you start taking it and then providing it to the traveler and putting language and cultural filters onto it so that the individuals can really understand the context of the information they're receiving, it's important. And that way you're giving a tool so that people can actually deal with all of the steps they're going to have to do for the next 2 years. They're going to have to be doing this, and you want to make it easy for them.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, thank you, Robin. And just a reminder to people listening and watching, you are able to provide some Q&A questions for the panel. So please do that if you want to. I will be notified of them on our chat function, and I will put them to them if we've got time before we finish. So Robin very cleverly introduced our next two speakers in his little speech there, because like he said, he is working very collaboratively across the board. So next up, we're beaming over to Hong Kong, to Tony at the i3 Group. Tony, so the same question to you just to kick off with, really. How's COVID-19 changing the way you do business? And where does what you do really fit into the future?
Actually, it has had a significant effect on parts of our business, especially our roaming services with our MogoS SIM cards. And also our booking engine with Ebly. So people aren't traveling, but what we're finding with our booking engine, similar to Gavin, is that there's a lot of interest in the next 6 months forward, quite positive interest in that. But as people haven't been flying and haven't been traveling, so using our services and our roaming SIM has declined. And we've actually started to look at the other divisions of our investment. So we invest in medtech and AI and robotics in different companies. And we've come up with a safe travel initiative that we're combining the divisions from our non-travel Travolution companies and bringing what that kind of technology can come to help us to move forward. And one of those, the safe travel, is that we're developing a range of smart kiosks, which we will work with private public partnerships with health ministries and tourism authorities and airports to install these kiosks that can have a multifunctional purpose, like a sentinel information center, where you can actually act as a dispenser of products, so PPE products and sanitizers, but also be able to take temperature readings, give advice of where to go in the airport. They can be mobile, they can be they can actually be full digitally displayed, and actually talking with Robin, you know, we can tie up with Travel Navigator. We've been talking with them for a while, and some of that information can be displayed within an airport environment. The health ministries can send their information through that, and we can then look at how we monitor that data and give information to people. We've also then gone another way where we're actually looking at sanitized travel. So again, using some of our robotics and AI, we're looking at how we can actually provide sanitization from a microbial point of view. And yeah, so there's a lot of things that we've actually moved from one sector, which we thought would be really affected. We're now just moving it back into and combining them all to make something a little bit more holistic for this sanitized travel that we really think that people want to be looking at. It's top of my list when I travel now. Is like, is it safe? Is it clean? Is it hygienic? Is it healthy?
Yeah. And like Robin said, Tony, you know, getting the information to people is crucial, but they have to be online, or they have to be able to get that information, and that's what obviously the core of your business is, facilitating that with the easy.
Yes, we're a connectivity company, so we basically work with you know, most of the operators around the world to provide that their internet access, but also these smart kiosks, and also then build in our VHub mesh technology to act as kind of local area networks to actually connect buildings, connect areas, and things like that. So allow people to actually receive it either on the mobile devices or from the screens themselves.
And just a final word, like I said, you're over there in Hong Kong. What's the sense you get over there? I mean, Hong Kong has had its other issues, obviously, this year, and they've come back a little bit since the lockdown has been eased. But just what's given what Gavin and Carlos are saying about sentiment, what's your feeling about the Middle East, the Far East travel prospects?
I think as Gavin was saying, I think this 6 month window is actually quite an important part here. We're really thinking 6 months out. Essential business, yes, we're thinking 3-4 months out. You know, so what's really affected us here is not just the cross-border China mainland cross-border tourism, which is pretty huge, but it's the business travel, because this is a financial center, it's an exhibition center, it's a business center, and you know, hotels that can actually, you know, that have maybe 900 rooms and are counting single-digit occupancy of people, not percentage. You know, there's 9 people in my hotel today. You know, these are issues that also have to be looked at. So not just from the tourism perspective, but also the business travel perspective.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Tony. So let's bring in our final 5th panelist from today's session. Again, Robin did mention Bespoke. So welcome, Akame from Japan. How are you?
Yeah, how are you?
Yeah. So a little bit about Bespoke, about how you've reacted to COVID-19. Obviously, Bespoke actually came out of a crisis, and the idea was born out of the crisis that Japan suffered a few years back, and obviously that's, you know, we've now got it in a global crisis. So how has Bespoke reacted? What sort of role do you think Bespoke and the kind of chatbots that you provide? I mean, I know you're working very closely with governments, and Robin mentioned that. You've got to work very closely with governments and official organisations to get the right information across. So just a bit about what Bespoke's been doing during this period to make it more relevant to travellers.
Right. So we make chatbots for destinations, government entities, airports, basically travel entities in general. Initially, we were like helping to do like over tourism, like to deal with over tourism. But probably since January, February, our focus has completely shifted to focus 100% to handle like emergency communication, mostly for public sector. So previously, 30% of our clients were still in private sector, like hotels, like railway companies and all that. To handle all these questions foreign tourists would send us, then we answer in multiple different languages, like 24/7, whenever they connected to, let's say, like public Wi-Fi at subway station or airport Wi-Fi. But now with travel restrictions, there is no single tourist almost in the country. Like the only ones we see today still are the ones who couldn't go home because of like the flight restriction, like visas canceled and flights were canceled, so they got stuck here. So those are the only ones. So right now our focus is like 100% on handling COVID-19 questions in non-Japanese language. So Bespoke is a company I started about like 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. And back in 2011, when we had a big earthquake, I almost died. I got trapped on the 20th floor of a high-rise building, and this is a real story. Um, my colleagues and I were lucky enough to use the emergency stairs to evacuate. It took us forever, and some parts of like ceiling started like falling over us, just the tiny parts, and then we started seeing cracks on the wall. And when we got to the ground floor, we were like, okay, we made it. But then we quickly realized it was only the beginning of the crisis. Things got much, much worse over the next few days. So, for instance, the nuclear plants up north blew up. And then all of a sudden, the radiation level in the air went up much higher than usual. So, we were all told to stay indoor, just like now. But then it just kind of got to the point where even British embassy would start like evacuating their people out of the country, and Japanese people started freaking out. Like, is there any information we actually don't know about? Like, should we also evacuate? And the events and all these moments were scary enough, but not knowing what was going on was way worse. So today at Bespoke, we have a solution to actually address that issue, to handle questions, like all these questions people send us during emergency, and we use our AI that we built for emergency purpose to reply back to all those questions. And
Yeah.
so over the last few months, we've been seeing a lot of like heartbreaking messages, like, oh, like I have fever and I went to emergency room, but I got rejected. Like, where else do I go, for instance? But then some of the problems that I see in the market right now is that like data is everywhere. So it's really hard to actually source like reliable data into our platform because we're just a solution provider, and data and contents need to come from somewhere else. And I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Akamai. She makes a great point there. Maybe one of the guys, Skyscanner, well, maybe Gavin can pick this up, but it's access to sort of reliable data at the moment that's important, but also it's real-time data. It's data that's telling you what's happening now, because I guess, before this happened, you could rely on historic data. You could go back to your trends that you'd seen over maybe 5, 10, 15 years and say, well, on that basis, the same is going to happen again at this point in the year. That's all gone. I mean, maybe that doesn't make any sense anymore to do that. You've got to actually start to almost track things day by day. And I guess people like yourselves can help with that because you've got that live search data.
Yeah, so I certainly think that we're in a position with the live search data, and we can tell just by the interest and the amount of sessions that are being set up between airline execs just now and our team members. But what's been clear as well is during these sessions with the airlines, and we've tried to make as much of the data visible as possible during this period for them. But it's a two-way street as well. We're receiving a great deal of information from the airlines in terms of what their customers are asking for, and in terms of operational, how they're going to move forward and things like that as well. So the sharing of data has been fantastic. And I think you're right. In the olden days of being able to just look at June 2019's booking levels and then making arrangements based on those levels, they're gone now. We've learned so much already. Luckily, Skyscanner had these surveys in place, and we had the search travel insight product in place. So we've learned how travel search has reacted during this period. So you look at, as an example, over the US market, we now know that when you're leading up to a major lockdown, in advance, then there's a spike in domestic traffic. There's a spike in one-ways, for example, as well. So there's a whole lot of new data points that we can reference as well. I think what will change moving forward as well is companies will be looking at internal models and their own tooling, whether that's building their own or looking at alternative sources. Skyscanner's done something similar. We've got our own sort of TI data, which is the search data. We've now got the sentiment stuff that I spoke about before, but we're modeling the COVID impact with other sources of data like OAG, flight capacity. We're pulling that in. We're pulling sort of COVID case data in from Johns Hopkins University, and multiple sources, and visualizing that and making business decisions and product decisions on that as well. So I would imagine, yeah, it's going to change the way we move forward as well.
Yeah. Carlos, over to you. I mean, you mentioned you're looking at social data, so you're looking at social sentiment. You know, that's a relatively new thing to bring in, and it's very unstructured data, so often it's very difficult to make sense of it unless you're doing it in a very sort of statistical manner. Are there other data sources now that you think are important to bring into this so that you can plan, because you can't rely on that historic data that you've probably kept for many years?
Yeah, well, we are monitoring social media, but other type of sources. From my opinion, this situation had come the sector to open the eyes of everyone, since we already know 4 months ago, before all, or 5 months ago, before all this started, that there were different sources and new sources of information. And I like to talk about information instead of data, since I think data itself is useful, it is useless. So we need to transform that data into information, to being able to do that step in between data and the information, right? But now the new situation, it's bringing everyone to look for answers, right? For what's going on currently. Social media is a good tool, since we are not asking anyone to respond to a question. We're just listening, watching, and interpreting what they are saying in a spontaneous way, right? That means in terms of perceptions, satisfaction, security, climatic, well, in terms of interest about tourist products, as I said before, but also cross-analyzing all this with the evolution of air connectivity, as just Gavin said, flight searches, flight booking, prices of flights and hotels, even spending patterns, which is gonna come next. I mean, when the new adopters, the new travelers start to visit again destinations, how they will react, how they will behave, since the reality is new, and we cannot pay attention to the last year's behavior, since everything is changing, right? And the good example is how the interest, for example, in a city like Barcelona are changing touristically, right? So there's, from the point of view, from the starting point, that there are some restrictions, for example, to go to freely to the beach. People looking to visit Barcelona have to change their preferences in terms of using their time in Barcelona in other type of products, and that's the key for the destination managers to better adapt their offer to the potential visitors right now. Yeah. So the only way to be truly resilient for a destination or for a company, it's knowing the current behavior and the actual dynamics, right?
Yeah, Robin, I guess what the problem at the minute is that we're living in an era when everything's changing so quickly. I mean, you know, just in the UK where I am, you know, just because there's been talk of easing of lockdown, the beaches fill. I mean, literally overnight, and people are just, they're there because the weather's been nice, and they're just desperate to get out. So people's behaviour is running ahead of the official recommendations at times, and at the same time, I guess the official recommendations are trying to work out what people's behaviour are, and we don't know what the quarantine rules are going to be. They're still making these regulations on the fly. It's very difficult, and it's constantly changing almost by the day. I mean, it's quite incredible. So very different. We talked earlier about, you mentioned reliability of data and information. So there's potentially a danger in this sort of thirst for information and data. We go to sources that aren't so reliable, I guess. How do you make sure that's not the case? Or you have so much data, it's just so confusing to make any sense of it?
Well, that's a good point. What you have to do is create some behavioral change. And Lee, you know my background. I've got an insurance background, mobility insurance background, but also a security background. I've worked in counterterrorism. I've worked in local domestic security. Part of the reason we developed the Travel Navigator app is to give robust but clear and trusted information to the traveler to help them understand the environments they're getting into, and not to be afraid, but to be aware. I've insured journalists traveling to war zones, and the risk is low because they know what they're doing, but they know what they're doing because they research it and understand it. You can't today, unfortunately, go to social media and get proper information that will help you navigate the world. One of the other areas that we have is I do a lot of international student insurance around the world. And with students, you have to guide them. You can't push them. You have to guide them with the right information. And you've got 4 different stakeholders now. You've got the traveler themselves, who needs to get synthesized data to help them navigate their travel, to make sure they're encouraged to travel. And like Tony said, that they're safe. They feel that it's a hygiene is there, that everything is taken care of for them. They've got to be able to interact with the information. Then you've got your travel industry that wants to encourage business because they've been decimated over the last couple of months. Then you've got governments that are worried, and a lot of worry is there from politics. Their economy, the socializing of their people, the psychological effects of their people. And then at the same time, what you've got is the local economy, where they're worried about it. There's a lot of places in the world that depend on travel and tourism. And now that's been taken away. And even in places like India, for example, where you have a lot of domestic workers and they had to go home with lockdown, they're stuck. So today, trying to encourage them with the right information in the right channel, so making sure the travel industry, like Gavin and Carlos were talking about, get the right data so they can judge what the next direction is, making sure the traveler can get the right information, like both Tony and Akemi are talking about, making sure that the governments are happy, because this is another thing. You're not going to get one process where everybody in the world is going to agree. I think we've seen that in the last couple of months. The US will not agree with China, and China won't agree with the US, and Europe is going to go one way. And I think if you look at Gavin's data, when he was showing 80% in the region of EMEA, that's a lot because the Europeans, the continental Europeans, have talked about internal travel and creating green zones and bubble. So people are starting to think it's safe, but they need to be directed so they don't go to the beach, like you said, and they all crowd together. Or in the US, where they have reasons to demonstrate, but you're going to have COVID breakout.
Yeah, that's true. So that comes back to how you get this information to people. And also, it's going to be a very complicated situation for a long time, it seems. Akame, it's going to be different rules, different regions, different countries operating on different protocols. We're going to see new health and safety badges being launched. It's going to be quite confusing for the average traveler. And actually, they just need the information on the ground when they get there, don't they? Which is what obviously you can provide, and it's mobile that's going to do that. So we're probably in a position now, in travel and tourism, where we can address these situations in ways we couldn't have done before. It is because of mobile or connectivity, things like chatbots, we can actually address this. So we've got to be, I guess you'd say, we've got to be positive that we can actually do this, and even living in a non-vaccine world, we can allow travel and tourism to carry on.
Right. So one of the reasons, well, the biggest reason we became an official partner for the Japanese government last year was the big typhoon. It was actually 2 years ago, sorry. The big typhoon, the storm actually broke the only bridge going to Kansai Airport. That's the main international airport in Osaka. So when that happened, all these passengers actually couldn't get out of the airport anymore. It created confusion because oftentimes in Asia, especially aside from Singapore and Hong Kong, when emergency happens, information is only available in local language first. But then in Japan, the number of people visiting the country literally tripled over the last like 6-7 years, well, until March. So all of a sudden we have all of these foreigners in town who need help. They're trying to fly out of the country or trying to rebook accommodations and all these different, they're trying to do all these different things. But then the government actually couldn't find any digital solution to actually get engaged with all these tourists to deliver information that they needed. And at the same time, government was looking for a way to collect information from travelers so they can do planning better next time before next big typhoon happens, right? So that was like a couple of years ago. And fast forward now 2020, we still have a bit of issues because data is simply not available. For instance, list of evacuation centers. The government actually doesn't have the proper database. Like simply like they do not have a list of evacuation centers. And to make things a little bit more complicated, in Japan, if you are a traveler, you don't go to the same evacuation center as residents. And we all, because like the database doesn't exist, we also can't tell which evacuation center is available or not. And then we get stuck with the same, like similar situation again now because hospitals are taking like COVID-19 patients. But again, like we don't know which hospital is taking COVID-19 patients and we don't know which hospital actually has more beds. So like, again, like it always comes back to like, okay, we're just a, solution provider and then the data and contents need to come from the government. But like all these emergencies started like helpful actually are the big reasons to push the government to put all the information together in one place so it could be used by all these different people.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously always one of the problems in a crisis, that the people on the ground that need information now can't find it. They can't get it from an official source because like I think like you've said, often they don't even know themselves, but they will go and find it from somewhere. And actually often it's coming from a social media feed because there's other people on the ground who are making either presumptions or they think they've got some information that is valuable and trustworthy, but you just do not know. So it's very, very difficult in the middle of a crisis to filter out the noise these days with social media, isn't it?
So last week there was a news out, something about Japanese government sponsoring up to 50% of your trips to Japan. Turned out that was also fake. Everyone got excited, but it wasn't real. It was on social media again. So right now we only source information from government. So Ministry of Tourism every day sends us information on like what they want us to say, and we have to manually upload it. This should be automated. There should be an API, but it's just not available yet.
Yeah. Now, I'm looking at our Q&A chat, and there's a question coming from Hong Kong. So this was going at Tony because he's in Hong Kong, so he's got the answer. And I know Tony's a very, very keen traveller, and understands what travel is all about. And that's a good question, really. But it's a very sort of thoughtful question about how travel can retain its kind of human nature, but also we can develop the tech side of it, because tech at times can be quite inhuman or feel inhuman. It's got great uses, but it can sometimes make it feel like we're turning into robots maybe. And actually travel is the opposite of that. Travel is about putting people together and humanity and learning things and new experiences. So any thoughts on that, Tony?
I think when we look at our industry, you know, tourism and travel. It's a human industry, okay? So, you know, even though we're looking at a lot of things being digitized through online bookings and things like that, which is removed from the bricks and mortar travel agent, we're going to see a lot of routine, repetitive tasks that are at the airports and things like that probably will be digitized. Maybe robot or you know, some sort of AI will work, and it'll allow then the freeing up of finding where those human touch points should be. Okay, whether that's you know meeting and greeting, whether it's you know sorting out problems personally rather than in different ways. So I think there's still a lot of scope for the human aspects in travel. I still hope we'll have a pilot and not an autopilot.
Yes, good point. We've got another question actually, picking up on what Akame was saying about over-tourism, because actually that before we came into COVID-19, you know, that was the big thing. Carlos mentioned Barcelona. Well, you know, in a few months, Barcelona's gone from having people saying, you know, we're not welcome, we don't want more tourists, just probably now saying, please come back, because they've got no tourists whatsoever. So it's amazing how quickly things can change. But one of the longer term trends people are suggesting might come out of this is that countries will be able to more easily spread people around away from hotspots, because actually people themselves will look to essentially isolate within the country the country they're going to on holiday. So they will look to avoid the hotspots. Maybe one for Carlos initially, but do you think, you know, we're going to become more inclined to avoid the hotspots and avoid the crowds? And what role can you play in highlighting where those are, so that we don't sort of all suddenly converge on the same beach like happening at the minute in the UK?
Yeah, totally. That was I was referring to the changing patterns on terms of interest, and I mentioned Barcelona is a good example. No, and I mentioned the example of sunbathing, but we can use even a more clear example with nightlife, for example, right? This is a tourist attraction, pretty important for some destinations, which is something totally different nowadays that it used to be ago. I mean, years ago or days ago even, right? So it's so important for the managers of the destination understanding that what are the trends driving for to better adapt their offer, right? So it's obviously a matter of coordination in between public and private sector, since there is a lot of business related to tourism and this kind of activities. But it's a key point to understand how is it flowing to better adapt it. And as you said, Lee, yeah, it's true that people is looking more for activities like active or natural tourist products instead of, for example, shopping or nightlife or this kind of attractions or tourist products that can bring to overcrowded places. So yeah, that's the reality. Yeah.
And Gavin, how can Skyscanner play a role in this? I mean, obviously your core product, your air product, is inevitably going to put people into a very busy place, which is an airport. But from there, they can go wherever, and actually you have car on the site as well. They could drive off to the countryside, try and avoid the hotspots. Do you now think it's part of your role to give people some advice and insight into where they might go so that they feel safe and they can trust and be confident in traveling again?
Yeah, absolutely, and our travellers have demanded that. Ironically, 2019 was for Skyscanner. It was really all about sustainability and eco destinations, because our travellers were demanding that type of information through our products. I can't think of an airline conference that I didn't attend in 2019 where sustainability wasn't number one topic through the whole thing. And obviously, we live in a whole different world now. But the demands for eco destinations and sustainable travel will pick up again, and as we start to see that growth coming through. Luckily, Skyscanner's already done a lot of work in that area on our product. If you look on a results page on Skyscanner just now, there's an eco label on the most efficient aircraft that are flying on the routes. And specifically around destinations, we've actually got an eco destinations feature now, that if you do a search from, say, London to Venice during peak times, then they'll maybe be highlighted those dates as red because they're an overcrowded period of time, and then we'll give you a suggestion that you maybe want to visit Lake Como in Italy at this time of year instead, etc. So there's information directing people to either a different time to visit Venice or another destination that's in there as well. And it's just feedback that we've had from our users. I think it's just important to set up those platforms that you can hear feedback from the users, what they demand. The challenge is going to be is bring COVID into this and all the questions that people are going to have on whether they should travel or not, with flexibility of tickets, refunds, health. And we're also challenged just now moving to mobile, so you're getting a smaller screen to fit more and more information in. So it's absolutely the right thing to do, moving to mobile, but it's going to be a challenge because there's going to be more and more information demanded from users out there.
Yes, great. That's a good point. And so we're near our time, actually. I'll give one last, just to follow up from that. You actually, Gavin, very cleverly answered the question that had come in about the changes you've made on Skyscanner.
Yeah.
So I haven't asked you yet. So I think we've covered that.
There you go.
But just one final thought from Robin before I give you the results of the poll, because there's a question about information overload, and actually sort of Gavin sort of started to talk about that when he talked about putting all that information onto a small screen and then people having to sort of work out what's most important. You kind of touched on it earlier on. It's about filtering, but there's an issue there, isn't there, about information overload? So maybe it's about giving it to them when they need it, at the time they need it, and not giving them stuff they don't really need.
In any kind of area, like healthcare, for example, it's very complex. Health literacy is weak globally. You have to be able to provide people with the right, correct information and feed it to them in a way that they can understand it. That's why we actually look at culture and language the same way. And then how you do the user design is very important. And you allow them to search and find or be able to push information directly to them. And depending on the type of user, so if it's an administrator, a high-level user, you can provide them higher level information depending on their capability. So there's ways of doing this. And I think one thing we have to deal with now is travel is a very human activity. And when you look at it, it actually makes the world a better place when we see that other people are more similar than we are, but we're similar, not different. And one of the worst things I see right now is this division that's happening and isolation. So we do have a chance to create a new travel going forward, and using technology, taking that together, getting the right information, and helping sort out the problems we've had and get back to a point where it actually can enable the world to be better. I think there is a way we can do this with technology. And I think working together and collaborative kind of innovation, we can do it.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point to end on, Robin. So thanks very much, guys, for your time, especially Robin. I think when you see what's going on in the US at the minute, when you talk about division, it's never a better time to try to sort of counter that kind of thing. So thanks very much for your time and efforts here today. Appreciate that, and I hope that was interesting to the audience. I'll just finish by reporting on our poll results. So the question we asked was, what is the biggest barrier to rebuilding confidence among travellers that technology could address? We gave you a number of options, including lack of real-time information, track and trace programs, COVID-19 testing regimes, health and safety protocols, social distancing rules, and then we gave you a lack of all the above at the time of booking. And the results were quite interesting in that so health and safety protocols came out second with 23%, and it was lack of real-time information, 13%. So we covered that in the session. Then the others were quite low, but the biggest one of all was the lack of all the above at the time of booking. So that's obviously going to be key. 49% there said they want information at the time of booking. Obviously, it's key to get it when you're there, because that's when you really need it. but we need to bring confidence back into booking and people being confident about saying, yes, I will go and travel. And, you know, that goes back to our start thing with Gavin and Carlos looking at those sentiments, which there's definitely latent sentiment there to travel. We can see that, but then people need that information when they're ready to pay and want to go traveling again. So we hope that will happen. Thanks very much again, guys. We look forward to seeing you again at a real-time face-to-face event at some point in the near future, fingers crossed. But for now, thank you very much, and we'll close the session there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.